First Football World Cup 1930 in Uruguay. The first Football World Cup was held between 13th and 30th of July 1930 in Uruguay, in Montevideo, the capital of this South American country. 13 national teams participated. The tournament was an invitational tournament, no qualifiers were held, and all teams that responded to FIFA's invitation could come to Uruguay. At the Congress in Barcelona on the 18th of May 1929, FIFA decided that the first place for the World Cup and the review of the best football selections would be Uruguay and its capital, Montevideo. The decision was made on the basis of two important facts. Uruguay celebrated the centenary of independence that year, but also that at the Olympic Games in Amsterdam in 1928, as well as 4 years earlier in Paris, the Uruguay football team was the Olympic champion. The decision of the World Football Association to award the organisation of the Premier Mundial to Uruguay as the first football superpower of that era to consecutive winners of the Olympic tournaments in 1924 and 1928, competitions that brought together the best national teams in the world, caused outrage in Europe. The English, although very interested in showing their strength, decided to boycott the championship, considering that the organisation of the first World Cup should have been awarded to the country where modern football was born. Italy, Spain and Netherlands also cancelled their trip to Uruguay. As difficult as it was to organise the first World Championship, it was as much, if not more difficult, to gather the participants to play in it. Due to the high costs, but also the length of the trip lasted about 3 weeks and most of the selections did part of the preparations on the ships. Many representatives, especially the European ones that had to cross the Atlantic, decided not to participate. At that time, it seemed that only American national teams would participate or that the championship would not even be organised. However, thanks to the agility and determination of FIFA, that changed after all, because this was the only championship for which qualifications were not required, while FIFA, with the help of the Uruguayan government, paid the travel expense of all participating national teams, and one of the main problems was solved. And so the final tournament featured the selections of Argentina, Chile, France, Mexico, Yugoslavia, Brazil, Bolivia, Romania, Peru, the United States of America, Paraguay, Belgium and the host Uruguay. The entire World Cup in Uruguay was played in only 3 stadiums, which is almost unimaginable from today's perspective. More precisely, the championship was played in only 2 stadiums for the first 5 days, while the biggest one was not completely finished. Of course, that first match at the biggest Centenario Stadium, or the popular Football Temple, with a projected capacity of around 100,000, was reserved for the hosts when they played against Peru, and at the very opening of the stadium there were about 85,000 spectators. 10 out of 18 matches in the entire championship were played at this stadium, including both semi-finals and the final. Next in terms of capacity was the Grand Park Central Stadium, owned by Nacional, with 20,000 seats where 6 matches were played. The last one was the Pochitos Stadium, owned by Peñarol, with a capacity of about 10,000 seats. Only 2 games were played there, but this stadium went down in history because the first goal in the World Cup was scored there. It was scored by the Frenchman Lucien Laurent, with a goal in the 19th minute in the game against Mexico. The competition system at this first championship was made so that all the teams were divided into 4 groups, and the winners of the groups automatically became participants in the semi-finals, which also seems unimaginable from today's point of view. Since there were 13 participants, only one group had 4 selections, while all the others had 3. Before the draw, it was known that each group would have its own seed. The host Uruguay, followed by Argentina, Brazil and the USA, was seeded and waiting for their opponents. After the draw, all the groups were known. The first group was the largest and also the only one with 4 participants: Argentina, France, Mexico and Chile. The interesting thing related to the matches of this group were, in the game between Argentina and Mexico, refereed by the Bolivian manager, the first penalty in the World Championships were awarded, and then 4 more in the same game. During the same game, the first hat-trick was achieved, which was renamed to the second in order since 2006, and it was done by the Argentinian Guillermo Stabil, the best scorer of this championship. The end of the match between Argentina and France was originally played in the 84th minute, but only after the protest of the French was it continued. The players were returned from the dressing room and it finished regularly. The main detail of the match that directly decided the semi-final between Argentina and Chile was a massive fight between the players of both teams. Group 2: Brazil, Yugoslavia and Bolivia. The interesting things related to this group were, Yugoslavian team consisted only of Serbs, mainly composed of players from 2 clubs, BSK and Yugoslavia, due to the Croat boycott because the headquarters of the Football Association had been moved from Zagreb to Belgrade. What is perhaps less well known is that the Brazilians were also weakened and made up of players who played for clubs from Rio de Janeiro. Group 3: Uruguay, Romania and Peru. Interesting things in this group were, in the match between Romania and Peru, the first red card at the World Cups was shown, and the Peruvian Placido Galindo was expelled. The home team waited 5 days from the opening of the championship to play their first game, as they waited for the Centenario Stadium to be completed. Group 4: USA, Belgium and Paraguay. The interesting thing about this group were, the USA team was made up of Americans but also Englishmen with American passports. In the match between the USA and Paraguay, the first hat-trick in history was scored, which had to wait 76 years to be publicly recognised by FIFA, and was achieved by Bert Pettenord. The first semi-final between Argentina and the USA was played on the 26th of July, and it was uncertain only in the first half when the Argentinian team led 1-0, and in the second half, a real cannonade from the Argentinians followed, while the Americans only managed to reduce the result to some extent and they score a consolation goal. The end result was 6-1 for Argentina. The second semi-final between Uruguay and Yugoslavia was played on the 27th of July. The result was the same, 6-1, 3-1, but the event on the field was significantly different. Namely, Yugoslavia took the lead in the 4th minute and surprised both the audience and the home players. After that, everything went to the mill of the hosts. Carried away by a great roar from the stands, where at that moment there were over 80,000 people. The home team started to play much better. First they equalised and then they took the lead. The grand final was played on the 30th of July at the Centenario Stadium, unofficially in front of around 100,000 fans and officially in front of 93,000 people. It again had a lot of bizarre situations and a domestic trial. The gates of the stadium were open for 6 hours before the start of the match due to unprecedented interest. The 2 national teams had an argument before the very beginning for a very unusual reason. They could not agree on which ball to play the final with, because each national team insisted that theirs should be played with. That knot was cut by Jules Rimet himself and brought about the Solomonic solution. The first half would be played with the ball the Argentinians wanted, and the second with the one that the Uruguayan hosts wanted. The result itself coincidentally moved in the same way. The Argentinians won the first half 2-1, and in the second half the hosts turned around and won with 4-2. With that, they became the first official champions of the world and grabbed the Golden Goddess, a trophy intended for the winner of the World Championship. It was the reason for a fierce fight between fans of Uruguay and Argentina on the streets of Montevideo. The guests, of course, were very mad, and everything ended with a political conflict at the highest levels and a break in diplomatic relations. The ambassadors were ground up again only after the Second World War. If you enjoyed this video, press the like button and subscribe for more football stories.